Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the ISIS.Forum titled Society 5.0, Technology-Focused, Human-Centered, organized in collaboration with the Embassy of Japan in Malaysia in commemoration of the 40th anniversary of the Lucky's policy. To begin this forum, may I have the honor of inviting Alizan Mahadi, Senior Director of Research, for his welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Farlina. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon and welcome to the webinar on Society 5.0, Technology-Focused, Human-Centered. Thank you for taking your time from your busy schedule to be with us today. Mr. Harizal Hazri, the Chief Executive of ISIS Malaysia, was going to deliver the welcoming remarks, but unfortunately he had to join a trip overseas to the Middle East. He extends his sincere apologies for not being able to welcome you personally, in particular to Dr. Harayama. Mr. Harizal was looking forward to being engaged in discussion with you, but hopefully we can do that another time. Today's webinar is special due to a couple of reasons. First, the webinar is part of a series of events held to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the Look East policy and the 65th anniversary of Malaysia-Japan relations. For me personally, organizing this webinar is a great example to illustrate the close bonds that our two countries, which involved in the cooperation between ISIS Malaysia, the Embassy of Japan in Malaysia, RICAN, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Japan as a space to exchange ideas. Furthermore, as Malaysia strives to continue its own development towards being a high-income nation that is sustainable and inclusive, it continues to look east and to look to Japan as an example of how our own evolution in development could learn from Japan's experience and future plans. Certainly, Society 5.0 is an exciting future vision that can potentially address some of the major challenges of our times. This includes specific challenges such as addressing an aging society, but also it transcends development as a whole, including addressing issues such as equality, climate change, and the economy overall. The second reason why this webinar is special is because the new normal that we find ourselves fits perfectly to the theme of the webinar today, which is both technology-focused and human-centered. Mr. Harizal first met Dr. Harayama online through his participation in the virtual visit to Japan program organized by the Embassy of Japan last September, and the acceleration of the digitalization has made events such as these a possibility. Nonetheless, while the new normal is accelerating, it is important to remember that technology is just a tool. It is neither good or bad. How we utilize technology is what matters. The challenge is that society is a very complex system, and therefore it is how we use technology to address these complex challenges will determine the outcomes. Moving forward, Society 5.0 offers a pathway for challenges to be addressed based on evidence, based on science, technology, and innovation. Furthermore, it needs to be driven by societal needs themselves. So in that note, it is gratifying to us, therefore, that we will learn more about the human-centered concept of Society 5.0. And there is no better person to present this idea and concept of Society 5.0 than Dr. Harayama, who is widely regarded as its pioneer. Dr. Yuko Harayama is currently the Executive Director of RICAN Japan and truly is a visionary. We are also glad to have Dr. Rachel Gong, Senior Research Associate at Kazana Research Institute, or KRI, who will give Malaysia's perspective on this issue. On that note, to my colleagues at the three institutions, the Embassy of Japan, Ministry of Foreign Affairs Japan, and RICAN, domo arigatou gozaimasu for your kind cooperation and support. And thank you to all of you for attending today. Without further ado, let us move ahead with the rest of the webinar. Thank you. Farlina, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Alizan. Moving on with this afternoon's program, we wish to invite the panelists for Society 5.0, Technology-Focused, Human-Centered. Alizan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Farlina. Those were my welcoming remarks, but we now move to the main and most exciting part of the webinar, which is the presentation itself by Dr. Yuko Harayama. In this presentation, I'm sure Dr. Harayama will unpack what exactly Society 5.0 means and how we can use it to achieve some of the development challenges, and of course, perhaps how we can link it to the context of Malaysia itself. Now, before we begin, I think the world and Malaysia mostly is still looking into how to catalyze the fourth industrial revolution, or Industry 4.0. But Japan is already looking into Society 5.0. So this is certainly very exciting as we begin to see the convergence between technology, cyberspace, the physical space, and more importantly, I think, converging to meet societal needs. So our esteemed speaker today, as mentioned, Dr. Harayama is the Executive Director at RIKEN, Japan's largest research organization for basic and applied science, and as highlighted earlier, is considered a pioneer for Society 5.0. She also has tremendous experience that transcends the science and policy interface, including spending 5 years at the Cabinet Office of Japan as an executive member of the Council for Science, Technology, and Innovation. Ms. Harayama also impressively holds a double PhD, a PhD in Education Sciences and a PhD in Economics, both from the University of Geneva. Her areas of expertise are science, technology, and innovation, policy, and higher education studies. Harayama Sensei, before we begin, allow me just to explain how this session will be conducted. We will first have about roughly 25 minutes presentation by Dr. Harayama on Society 5.0. We are also then honored to have Dr. Rachel Gong to provide her views as a discussant. We will then have about half an hour for Q&A from the floor. So if you have any questions, please post them on the Q&A function of Zoom and we will pick up as many as possible. With that, I would like to hand the floor to you, Dr. Yuko Harayama, to provide your presentation. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much for your kind introduction, and thank you for having me today. And I'm so glad and happy to talk about Society 5.0, and not just presenting, but having your feedback on this concept and sharing idea between Malaysia and Japan. So let's start. I will invite you to go back to 2015, just at the time when we started to talk about how to prepare our next 5-year planning for science and innovation policy. So it was 2015. I will just say that this time it was really just at the beginning of the trend of digital transformations. And we tried to really capture the power of AI, and it was the mainstream within the policy. But at the same time, all these enabling technologies and transforming our societies with these technologies, positive side, but also we may have some negative impacts on the society. So probably when we push ahead with AI and all the transformation, it may have impact on ourselves and also what we have constructed as a society. So something that we have to think about. Also, thanks to these digital transformations, we see our society more and more connected and networked. And it facilitates the interaction and transactions. And also we see something that's happening at the global level, immediately sharing information. And the question would be, what do national borders mean under this networked connected society? As well as the first point, these connectivities allow us to really to be together. But at the same time, so we become more and more dependent. So when something happens, like natural disasters, and we are not able to be connected again, we feel really isolated. And we see that we are becoming too so independent of other partners and so on. Also, when we see the jump of new technologies, this takes the case of genome editing technology or development of neurosciences. What we thought impossible 10 years ago, 20 years ago, now it's possible. And we may be able, we feel that human have a power and capacity to impact in depth in the nature and including human being ourselves. So I may say it was a time that we see coming all the challenge technologically and transforming the society, but at the same time, we have been surrounded by many uncertainty. Then In terms of preparing next 5 years scientific innovation policy, we thought it was any more possible to continue to formulate policy business as usual. Because traditional way was really formulating 5-year planning and preparing technology roadmap, because we have been working in certainty. And also we have been used to really focus on the framework condition for innovation. And when these conditions are fulfilled, something may happen smoothly. If you have to really prepare vis-a-vis the future with uncertainty, you have to really empower the capacity to really be the preparedness for the unforeseeable future. And also so many global and societal challenge we have to address, not just to mention climate change and geopolitical uncertainty. And also we have to take care of our future generation in terms of not just satisfying to their generation, but the action we are taking today will be impacting so in depth the future of society, future of the world, and that's mean future generations. So we have to think about that. For that, we felt really one of the value, critical value will be inclusiveness, to make sure that everybody is on the same board, and then trying to capture the potential of everyone. So with this thinking, naturally, you see that we have to put society at the heart of our formulation of scientific innovation policy. So the concept of Society 5.0 are born within this framework. You heard about Society 5.0 already. You know the name. And what I try to do now is really explain to you what's the core parts of this concept. As I explained to you in a previous slide, we have been moving from just formulating policy for technology by sea, but putting more emphasis on the society. So really, we had really fundamental shift from technology-driven formulation into more human-centered approaches. To make sure that we are moving in the right directions, and we have to take for that advantage, fully the advantage, the power of science, technology, innovations. So we say society should be backed by exploring all the power of scientific innovation, which may include artificial intelligence, big data, Internet of Things, robotics, quantum technology, so on, so many others, but among them. And also to make sure that we are putting society at the heart, we have to have some common understanding how to run society. For that, we need to have some kind of shared value by people within the society. And after the discussion and really foreseeing the future, we came up with some key values mentioned here. Openness, and thinking about the future, we have to have the value of sustainability at the heart, and also, as I mentioned, inclusiveness. So respecting value of openness, sustainability, and inclusiveness is key. And it is not anymore society design formulated by technocrats or politicians, but it should be kind of designed by everybody. That's why we say we have to take everybody on board to make sure that it is for us. So you say society, you understand now why society, but why 5.0? So this is the way we have formulated our policy, just saying that we are producing new technology. It's good for the society, expected to be useful for the society. But we have a long history of developing technology. And we have to take account the lesson that we have learned as a humanity to the past. So we move to back to really at the beginning, starting with the Homo sapiens. And then we say, look after the hunting and the gathering society, first one, 1.0. We have been very busy as a human to have to eat something to survive. And those you have been surrounded by not so friendly nature, but we have been thankful to the fruits of nature. That's mean, in some sense, to survive and to make sure that we have next generation to keep humanity. We have to find some way to be in symbiosis with the nature. So it was already, we have kind of sustainability in our mind. But human nature is not just satisfying what you have. You want to go further. You want to explore more. And with this, not to be at the mercy of nature, but human starting to work on the nature. That means we have been moving into agrarian society. Controlling and planning yearly, we have to work together with people. And this has been the beginning of a human organization. You have been living in the same place and then taking care of your agricultures. And then with this, you have been able to accumulate some goods. That means you have been able to exchange goods, and it became a new type of organization that we can say it is a beginning of a structural society, 2.0. Later on, at the agrarian society, you have been using your power, animals' power. Now with the industry society, you have been able to create yourself as a human power. So the key is mastering of power, and with this, it allows you to have mass production using all the structures. So as you know, the capitalism started with that, and you have some new category of worker within, and so on. So, and then now today we are under what we may call information society 4.0. The shift from the industry society into information society is that we have more and more value created, much more not by tangible asset, more by intangible asset, information. And the value is when you are dominating on the network, you can extract the value from this. We are just experiencing new type of running society, new type of creating economic value. And that, as I said at the beginning, we are more and more connected. And we have the impression that everything is working at a global scale, global level. And you don't need to go anywhere, but you can have all information, connect with people, and so on. So, but we are not stopping with this status. What we are trying to do is exploring all this potential with information technology. But by doing that, we can imagine next step, what could be the future society, where we are moving with taking advantage of all technology, but some kind of idea of constructing next society. So 5.0 is not yet there. We are really designing and conceptualizing what should be the next one. And we have to take action today to make sure that we are moving in the right direction with the next society. So this is the story, but it should be up to us. So the goal of discussing and putting on the table the concept of 5.0 is that we have to advance scientific innovations. Of course, we will try to achieve economic growth and also not only economic growth, but well-being for society and well-being of people. And we will use all the digital transformation as an enabler. Not the final goal is not just digital transformation, but it's a mean to really achieve our goal of well-being. And also, we have to really make sure that we are addressing societal challenges, like, for example, the case of Japan, I guess it's be the same for the Malaysia later on, aging society in a mature society, and we have more and more people beyond the age of 60, and know for sure that we can sustain society in the balanced way. So we have to take advantage of all the technology. And also we have to think about the challenges. We may have problems or challenges that be induced by digital transformation. As I mentioned already, the question of dependency on technology, or we may think about social divide due to the digital transformation. So many things that may happen. How to protect privacy and so on. So Japan proposing 5.0 was within the context of formulation of scientific innovation within Japan. But at the same time, we say we have to serve for the global prosperity as a member of global society. So the key will be through the eyes of society where we may contribute to achieve sustainable development goals. And also we may contribute to really, to formulate governance framework for digital transformation. So it's not only national level idea, but global level. And we are very happy to really share this idea with other countries, including Malaysia, to exchange and really to better shape our way of being Society 5.0. Since then, that means since 2016, when we have been formulating officially this concept, many interpretations have been proposed. Some may say Society 4.0, that means just cyber physical system, because we are linking and we are depending on data transformation. And some say also it is digital transformation itself. And some more tech people say it is combination of big data, AI, robotics, and so on. But also conceptualized from the societal point of view, some say it's really society, data-driven societies, and many others. So I would say all these aspects are parts of our idea of Society 5.0. But fundamentally, we need to have underlying thinking in terms of what I explained to you before, kind of guiding principles, if it is compatible with this, or maybe captures. That means, don't forget, we are thinking the future society, human-centered, backed by the power of scientific innovation, sharing what is key for the structuring of society, openness, sustainability, and inclusiveness. And don't forget everybody on board. Today, since 2020, we are under COVID-19. And we know that it's impacting all our society, not only on the public health lives, but also the way we are interacting with people. So COVID-19 posed new rule of the game to all of us. huge constraint on our mobility and also on person-to-person relationship. Even with your friends, it's not so easy to see your friends and to be connected. And most of social institutions have been impacted. And we see as a consequences, increase inequality and social divided as consequences. At the same time, this COVID-19 imposed us to really take much quickly advantage of technology. So accelerating data transformations, so many online meetings, thanks to online, I'm with you today, even staying at home in Japan. And to develop vaccine and other treatments, we have been using fully the structured open science, and we have been able to track people's movements, surveillance, contact tracing. And we have been learning during these 2 years to act differently. Today, virtual substituting partially physical, and we are discovering the sense of community and solidarity because we are helping mutually. And what's have been lost by the past, even connected through internet, sometimes we felt isolated, but now we are already working together. And we have been forced really focus on what is essential. Still, key elements, we recognize the role of scientific innovation, in particular in life sciences. And also, we learned that key is preparedness for the next round. And also, we have to take responsible action for future generations. So you see something similar to Society 5.0. So I would say, just backing this impact of COVID-19, we see many components linked to the ideas of Society 5.0, because we have to address all the social institutional impact, and basically we have to put human at the center. And building, redesigning a sense of community is where you have to take everybody on board and taking advantage of science technology, and also this value of openness, certainly includes a key. So I would say, I'm wondering at the beginning, Society 5 is still valid today? Response will be, for me, at least it is yes, because human center is really the most, and we feel it's more than ever before. And also taking advantage of the power of scientific knowledge. Just to mention that to understand COVID-19 and to develop vaccine in a really within 11 months, we have been able to put into place the vaccine, therapeutics, and tools, and to understand the impact of COVID-19 on our society and human beings, thanks to the social sciences and economic analysis. And the value of its openness, sustainability, and inclusiveness, because it is allow us to have really rebuilt the sense of community at the heart of our actions. Everybody on board, since we have to address the problem, inequality, and social divide observed. So I just finished with this slide, how to act today. And we need to take really actions, but socially responsible action needed. And it is not only for us, but for the future generation. And also to preserve our democracy, the key value. And the shared value, as I said, and including diversities. And probably we have to act different in the sense that we have to rediscover the sense of community and solidarity, and really preserving human touch. Digital is not digital, but because we have a human touch. And what should do that is that we need to have a really multi-stakeholder approach to design our future. and at the same time reconciling private and social benefits. So I would say not only COVID-19, but even more, these ideas so important for me is after February 24. So I finish here, and I'll be happy to discuss with you and chatting with you and to discover Malaysian perspective of society 5.0. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Harayama, for a very brilliant presentation. I think what struck me one of the most is how strongly the guiding principles is featured in the framework. So you can see it is clearly principle driven, where the technology that you've highlighted, IoT, big data, etc., is more conceptualized as a tool, as an enabler, rather than an end in itself. In other words, it's a means to an end rather than an end in itself, and those ends are guided by the principles. But what was interesting as well, I thought, was the ends itself was not determined. As you say, it's determined through the process. So in that case, Society 5.0 is conceptualized as a process itself, where it has to be a consensus across society as well. So very interesting framework that you provided, and I'm sure that has paved the way for a good discussion we will have later. Before we go to the discussion, just to remind everyone, please feel free to enter your questions using the Q&A function as we go along with our presentations and discussions today. Please feel free to submit your questions as we go along. Okay, just as a first response, we are honored today to have with us Dr. Rachel Gong, who is a Senior Research Associate at Kazana Research Institute, KRI, and she focuses on digital policy, including digital inclusion, digital economy, and digital governance. So she's a perfect person to discuss this, especially from a Malaysian perspective. I believe, Dr. Rachel, you also recently produced a book with KRI on digital policy issues. Dr. Rachel Gong also received a PhD in sociology from Stanford University. So Dr. Rachel, floor is yours. Perhaps you can share your views and really start the discussion that hopefully we can have in the spirit of Society 5.0, the discussion with various stakeholders and the audience today as well. Please, Dr. Rachel, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alizan, and thank you to ISIS for organizing this and for the opportunity to speak on this panel. What an honor to be speaking after Dr. Harayama and listening to her comments today on Society 5.0. I think it's really interesting, and this idea of human-centered approach to introducing and adopting technology in society is really very important to consider. What I plan to do today is where Dr. Harayama has kindly laid out this beautiful blueprint for us to think about how we might build a building. I think it's so important to have the context for the sort of machinery that we're using or the land that we're building on, and address some of the challenges or some of the potential difficulties that one might see in trying to make Society 5.0 a reality. And I think one of the important places to start is when we're talking about a human-centered approach. One of the first things we have to do is reckon with sociological challenges. And so it's important, I think, for us to recognize and to confront and address two big sociological challenges that face society, any society that involves humans and groups of humans. The first one being the sort of consolidation of power or resources among an elite group. And so the inequality that comes out from the unequal distribution of resources. So we're talking here about how do we get technology to be effective for everyone, to be meaningfully used by everyone. Then we have to think about how we redistribute power and resources. And the second challenge coming out of that, partly because of inequality and partly because of a very human tendency to think about ourselves as belonging to an in-group and an out-group, a sort of us versus them. It's hard, it's a challenge to get the mindset to think of, universal benefits for society. It's always the tendency is going to be, well, me first, my group first, my organization, my community, my country first. And this idea of making sure that now that we're in a global society, we're trying to get technology to benefit everyone, breaking down these two big challenges is something that we really do have to address. And what happens here when we're dealing with these human tendencies to begin with, as we introduce the adoption of technology, we start to see yet another challenge arise in network effects. Because what happens here is that early adoption of technology, of science technology, of digital technologies, machinery, whatever it may be, will be felt by the people who have the power and resources to begin with. And they benefit first before these effects reach the rest of broader society. And so these network effects actually exacerbate the problems that we see in the beginning around inequalities, and the push for inclusion has really got to be very intentional. And where we could then see a solution to these three challenges, the challenges of power distribution, resource distribution, the challenges of bias and discrimination, and the challenges of network effects and early adoption, is if we saw intentional interventions. So you might think here that government could come into play, that large institutions could come into play, that they could really work on this problem of how do we get all the different stakeholders. Very excited to hear the idea of multiple stakeholders coming in and having an impact on the decision-making of how society is transformed into Society 5.0. But therein lies another unstated problem, I think, which is around the issue of trust. Can you trust the people that you're working with? When we try to get everybody involved, and again, the people with more power, with more resources, are likely to have more influence on the decision-making. Are we able to trust the conversation is in the public interest rather than in the interest of a select community or a select group of participants? So I think these are big challenges that we face in trying to achieve Society 4.0, but the blueprint is there. I think it's a great thing to start with, to have this idea of we know what we're trying to do, we know where we're going. And it's important, I think, not to overlook some of these challenges and dismiss them and sort of say, well, if we focus on the bigger picture, if we focus on sustainability broadly, that a lot of these human problems can be dealt with. So where I might propose some ideas for the Malaysian context, as you mentioned, Alizan, we did have I did publish a book last year that talked about digital inclusion and digital governance. And these are things that we have been advocating get taken into the digital transformation of Malaysia. Is really pushing meaningful connectivity and closing that digital divide. And I think a lot of times the challenge is for us to look at metrics that are at the macro level and to say, okay, well, we have coverage in 95% of areas, but we're not looking at the human side of things at the micro level and seeing, oh, well, okay, what does it mean that 95% of areas are covered? Are people actually able to use, in the internet in a useful way? Is it helping them study? Is it helping them, not study, is it helping them learn? Is it helping them work? Is it helping them create? Is it helping them connect to people? And that's the kind of thing that really, I think, will lead to the kind of Society 5.0 that we'd like to see in Malaysia. So definitely closing the gap, the digital divide is one. And I think the second thing, being prepared for a lot of uncertainties. Technology moves so fast, not just digital technologies, but all technologies. And I think we're used to a mindset of building on a foundation that has been set before, standing on the shoulders of giants and so on. And we want to stick with what works. But really, with technology moving so fast, it's difficult to do that. We have to be a little bit more agile. We have to be a little bit more flexible about what's working, what's not working, about saying, this may have worked for us 20 years ago. It's probably still working right now, but in 5 years' time, it's not going to work. So let's think creatively about what we're going to do, how we're going to make decisions to build in systems that will work 5, 10, 30 years from now. And that really, to Dr. Harayama's point, really involves getting multiple stakeholders at the table. And that's, I think, a big challenge that that we're facing as well, and that we've been advocating to get more people, to get more digital rights people, to get more lawyers at the table, to get more activists who are working on the ground, persons with disabilities, to come in and see really how can we all benefit from science and technology. And that's the way I think we're going to move that forward. So I'll leave those remarks on the table first and see what people would like to pick up and continue with. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rachel. I think you certainly gave the brilliant response that's very thought-provoking and a good basis for our discussion. I think what really caught me as well is the focus of human-centered or Society 5.0. On the flip side, perhaps, is that there's also human nature problems that derive from the human nature as well. And in particular, I think you've highlighted some of these challenges where essentially that any framework does not occur on a power vacuum. So there's a political economy, there's a sociology aspects of that as well. So I think it's very important to keep that into consideration as well, especially implementing it, for example, in the context of Malaysia. Okay, we now have about half an hour for the question and answer session. Once again, please feel free and take the opportunity to ask questions. We have very esteemed speakers and discussants today. So I really would like to invite all of you to really keep the questions coming. We already have a few, so I will throw some of these questions here. We have a question from Mr. Tek Chang Leng. This is specifically for Dr. Harayama. This is quite a lot of the concern, I suppose, with the transition in terms of technology is what happens to those that rely on essentially the substitution with the human labor. So here the question is, what's Japan's strategy or policy to streamline the transition so that human skills that are taken over by tech are not left out? Dr. Harayama, would you like to respond to that?
Thank you. And first of all, thank to Rachel for your inspiring question and comment. I would like to discuss with you for a while, more than 1 hour, but to make sure that we respond to the auditors. The question is really critical because when I say step by step, society 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we are not just skipping one step to another, but we have to have some kind of transition phase, and we need to have transition management. In particular today, what has been mentioned with Rachel, we see with the development technology, not for the good of society, sometimes leaving aside some people. And this is the question of digital divide. And it is the role of government or some institution, NPO, to take care of this aspect. Otherwise, we are not advancing as a society. For that, in particular, it is not so new because by the past, when new technology appear on the society, and young people are very easy to adapt to new technology. But elderly or those who are not really keen about new things, really they feel isolated. And today, almost all society is digitalized in some sense, providing services and so we have to adapt ourselves. But at the same time, we may have a technological solution in the way that you can provide as you can prepare human-friendly technology or introducing new interface facilitated for elderly to be really using with a natural sense. But also in the workplace, what is key now, with the introduction of artificial intelligence system within, we feel that labor forces, worker may be under the control of AI, some people. So for that, we need to really have, as I said, people from the beginning on board. in the way that when you have ideas, really introducing all this technology in your place, probably from the conceptualizations, from the designing the system, you need to take care of what's the power you have today, and then what should be the parts you can really efficiently replace in some sense by AI, but at the same time, how to really make these existing workers to use or to be able to complement the new system. One question is training, also assigning other tasks that by having more technology, and you may spend less time for the production itself, and then you can use for more interesting work. So we need to really review the organization, full spec of your workplace, in the way to really make sure that you have human has its place.
Thank you, Dr. Harayama. I mean, equally, Dr. Rachel, this challenge, of course, is being faced by Malaysia as well. There's a lot of nervousness in terms of technology replacing labor, especially the digitalization, perhaps. What's your view? Same question, but put it in the context of Malaysia.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think there's definitely this concern that automation is going to, put a lot of people out of work. But together with the development of automation comes the need for new skills to deal with it. So it's a question of how do we develop those skills, how do we equip people with those skills so that they can continue to find ways to participate while benefiting from the efficiencies provided by technology. I don't think the solution, in my opinion, the solution is not to hold back the automation. It's about trying to find a way to make, again, with that human-centered approach of trying to get people prepared to deal with it. But I would also say in the Malaysian context, I think these concerns are not something that, at least in my opinion, are not something that are going to have a severe effect in Malaysia. Like the kinds of jobs that Malaysians have at the moment are not likely to be taken away very quickly by automation. You see some things, for example, in people talking about manufacturing and how certain kinds of drones or developing different types of machinery would put a lot of factory workers out of jobs. But the way in which manufacturing is done in Malaysia, these things would take time anyway to implement in factories and so on. And so there is time to give people the skills they need to work with the new technology. That would be my quick response on the Malaysian setting. Thank you.
We'll move on to some few other questions that were raised in the Q&A function. There are two questions from King Yi Leong. This is both for Dr. Harayama and Dr. Rachel. The first question is, currently what we are seeing is an over-centralized focus of power and control over consumer data by big corps such as Google, Meta, and Amazon. Is there any way for the common folk to take back a level of control over the safety and protection of our personal data? This is a hot topic now in Malaysia in particular, especially with My Sejahtera. Or is pushing for a metaverse the way forward for Society 5.0? That's the first question, but we'll ask both questions. Secondly, some futurists say that integration of AI is the way to go. How does that fit in the grand scheme of Society 5.0? Maybe I'll ask Dr. Rachel first, and then I'll go to Dr. Harayama. Dr. Rachel?
Sure. Thanks. Thanks, Jeannie, for the question. Let me try to touch on the personal data and governance aspect first, because that is something that we have been advocating as well. This idea of a balance between a data policy framework that both protects personal privacy, but allows enough anonymized microdata use such that effective and more efficient policy can be developed. Because you don't want policy being developed in a vacuum without that data. but that data necessarily comes from people, and you want to make sure that they're not giving up more than they need to. So where I would say we can work, what people as a whole can do, and let me go at two levels, right? I think first of all, what is needed is a data governance framework. And this has to be a holistic data governance framework that is not just about these two issues that I've described, open data or data privacy, but deals with what is now really data as a part of the economy, data as something that we just give off as surplus in the way we interact with our devices, data as input for things like policy and science and research and innovation. So we need a holistic data regulation framework here. And this is where policymakers, lawyers, technologists, experts really need to come together and work on this. And I think there are baby steps happening in Malaysia with the PDPA being reviewed and task forces being developed to look into this. But as we go back to the points raised earlier about making sure that there are multiple stakeholders representing the public interest and not just private and business interests in the discussion of how data governance should be done. So on one level, that's where policymakers can participate. What the common folk can do, I think twofold. Number one is, and it's terrible, I think, that we have to start by really educating ourselves. It shouldn't be all on the individuals to educate ourselves, but that's where we are at the moment, and that's what we need to do, is learn about the implications of data breaches and data governance for us, so that we care about it a little bit more. And then the second thing is to try and make sure that our representatives, our MPs, our ADUNs, members of state assemblies and things like that who represent us in politics are aware that this is something people care about, that it's not just minutia for lawyers and contract writers to deal with, but it's something that impacts people, and they need to look into it. So I think kind of raising people's voices, as it were, is a way for the average person to get involved in this process. I'm gonna pass on the metaverse question for the moment, because I think that's a much bigger conversation. But let me try and talk a little bit about artificial intelligence as a whole. I think it's a very good question to raise here, and question the assumption that artificial intelligence is going to be built into everything we do. I think we are at the right moment to stop and ask if that's really what we want. If we want to just hand over a lot of our preliminary decision-making to automation because it's more efficient, to AI and algorithmic decision-making because it's more efficient, or at least it seems that way, or if we want to challenge that and say, do we really need it? For example, I think in 2020, when students in London or students in the UK, were applying to go to university, they couldn't take exams. And so there was an algorithmic decision that had to sort of predict what their results would be and use that for deciding which universities they should go to. And there's a question of why did we need to do that? Why couldn't we just have relied on the traditional method of, hey, the teachers who know the students best, they're the ones who could write letters of recommendation, and we go with that, and let human beings decide when it's best to use artificial intelligence and algorithms and algorithmic decision making, and when to rely on humans. So that's, I think, a conversation that can take place right now, and we shouldn't assume that the decision has been made, that integration of AI is the way forward. So it's good that we should ask that question right now.
Thank you, Dr. Rachel. Dr. Harayama, your views on these questions on...
Thank you. I'm quite in line with Rachel. AI is there and going to be more and more embedded in our society. The question is that it's not like a manufacturer product like car that you can see and you can touch, but AI is there, invisible for us, for user. Take the case with your smartphone. You have your smartphone almost all the time, and it is physical stuff, but within and behind and connected to all the information system. And there we are exploring fully the new algorithm coming due to the AI. So it is something that we are confronted, really touching almost all day with AI's product. In some sense, we are user of AI, but we are not so conscious about that. So if you are using AI within your production units, you know what is it. But what is you have to take care is with the ordinary people and also consumer becoming dependent on the decision made by AI without not so conscious about the fact, but at the same time, through smartphone, you are providing almost all your personal decision data to the very big company, as it been mentioned on the question. It is, I see the differences between generation, my generation and young generation. We do not have the same attitude vis-a-vis your privacy, your data. For myself, I don't like to really give up all my data. But for young people, when you feel very efficient and also useful, and why not give up some of your data? You have different attitudes. And they are sometimes unconscious, but almost of young people, they know what it does mean. So we need to have really some kind of evolving policy, because the capacity of technology you have today will be different within 1-2 years. So we have to adapt new way of regulation. So as I say, it is not almost impossible to give up to the government, decide all the regulation, how to manage data. So we need to have around the table, as I say, multi-stakeholder discussion to decide how to handle. And we have to test some kind of regulatory framework, and we have to be adapting through time and to make sure that it is not against the people. So I stop here because I'm quite in line with Rashid, and we have to be adaptive. And also just a few words about metaverse. It is coming on everybody is talking about the metaverse, but we don't know yet, but maybe. But we have really kind of a learning process with AI. Even still, AI is much more advanced compared to metaverse that we are using now. So we need to take care of experience of this AI, and we will see with metaverse what's happening.
Thank you. If I can follow up some of the issues that were highlighted there about AI, and go a step further. Dr. Rachel highlighted about whether we need sometimes AI for decision making. Now, Dr. Harayama, is Society 5.0 also seen in the context of technology being used for governance itself? We see, various technical issues that are occurring in the world. We've got the pandemic, of course, but highlighted as well as climate change, for example, where it requires scientific information. It requires evidence-based for decision making. So where does the context of governance fit into Society 5.0? Is it being seen to the point of potentially technology not replacing governance, but undertaking decision making for some elements, major elements in terms of governing itself? Dr. Harayama?
I was muted. Regarding the governments, the local government also evolving through time. For example, when I look at the Japanese government, when we knew the phase of economic growth that in 1970, 1980, we have been able to really take advantage of use of new technology to translate in terms of economic value, thanks to the diligence of the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, METI. It was very, this period was quite easier compared to today to guide industry from the government, because you had to have the follow US technology advancement. Then we have really able to write some kind of roadmap. Today, the difference is that we do not know fully the potential and sometimes danger of new technologies coming in. So also we have to really watch what's happening on the ground, and in the sense that the government do not have full information to decide appropriately direction of governments and also regulation and so on. So that's why we have to have encourage different experts to bring their expertise to discuss together and then to find the way to move on. And then also we need to take account of kind of what's happening on the ground in the way that we'll be able to adjust according to what's happening. So it's more difficult to the government decide alone. And we have to have really, as I say, inclusive way to make decision at the global level, including climate change and all these things, and really engaging people to contribute.
Thank you. Dr. Rachel, would you like to share your views on this, governance and AI?
Sure. Thanks, Alizan. Let me give an example here. Let's say, we know in Malaysia, for example, there is a lot of problems finding affordable housing. And we have a social housing program. We have a social housing program that allocates people to open housing provided by the government according to a wait list. So you might argue that if we were to use algorithmic decision-making in this scenario, we could identify, not just by going through a wait list of who registered first and filled up the form first, but who is in the greatest need, and therefore would be allocated housing first, prioritized over others, and that there could be an algorithm that would be developed to take into account what we would consider the greatest need. For example, number of children or number of seniors, that sort of thing. But that's how hypothetically AI might be used in governance in Malaysia. But what we've seen as it's been practiced in the United States, and I draw here from the example of Virginia Eubanks in her book on automating inequality. She's got a very interesting case study there of how the local state did, I think it was California, did actually try to do this, put in an algorithm in place, but because of all the biases inherent in the data that was collected to make this decision, the algorithm wound up giving biased decisions anyway. And would that have been worse than if people had just used, the wait list to begin with? It's hard to say. The net result is there's still a number of people being deprived of housing or in this social assistance program. So I think, in thinking about how we want to incorporate AI into governance, it's really, really important to tackle head on the challenges that are implicit or that are unspoken in how the technology works and how the data are gathered to make these decisions, and then to see how best the technology can be used to help.
Thank you. There's many questions that can be asked there, and this is potentially very much a topic that needs to be discussed further as we go along. Okay, but let me move to a slightly different topic, which was raised by Edmund McMillan, which is on cyber security. A lot of the focus here, not only, but a lot of it is on digitalization, and of course, the emerging issues of security threats with the rapid development of AI, IoT, in line with the industry's effort towards 5G networks. So can you comment on some of these security threats, and perhaps in particular, how do we address them moving forward? Dr. Harayama?
Of course, we have already not only cybersecurity, but we have data security, and all these aspects should be integrated, because we should, around the world, so many, as I say, regarding the idea of Society 5.0, it's really trying to capture, to move in the right direction. But, you know, in any cases, you don't have already people moving in the same directions. And then you may have be captured by other association of people just taking advantage of this aspect. So what we have to ensure is that security first, but it is almost impossible to fully secure 100%, because when you advance in technology, someone may encounter this advancement, and then the security is really a never-ending story. That's why we have to continue to work on that and make sure that the people are aware of security issues and be able to react when something happens. Kind of preparedness for these security issues is key, and it is almost impossible to do for individual level. That's why we need to have at the government level security officers surveillance system, and so we have to have combine different layer of security system.
Thank you, Dr. Harayama. We have a few minutes left, and I think I would like to go back to actually some of the comments made in Dr. Rachel's intervention. I think you wanted to respond to some of them as well. I think quite a few very interesting points were raised. In particular, first of all, if I captured it correctly, as I said, Society 5.0 is you know, there is the framework, but the context is very important, and we know that there are you know, the political economy, there is unequal power distribution at the moment, and so on. So how do you include, or how do you address this the political economy in Society 5.0 moving forward? I think this is especially in the context of Malaysia, is a very interesting component. Dr. Rachel also highlighted the need to reduce the digital divide gap, to address the pace of technological change, being agile, and as well concurring with the need for multiple stakeholder engagement. So Dr. Harayama, would you like to address some of the things that were highlighted by Dr. Rachel earlier? Some of the things I mentioned, but perhaps other points as well, Dr. Harayama?
I see the challenge in the same way than Rachel. Technological advancements, it is something you can not stop, because it's the nature of human being to do more, to advance more. So, and then it's become more and more sophisticated and complex, and almost impossible to foresee what's with the technology within 5 years. So having said that, the use of technology will be really impacting society, impacting our life, our way of interacting. And then almost impossible to foresee what could be the potential negative impact of today in advance. So we'll be able to adapt, to really check what's happening, and then, as I mentioned, to be agile and flexible and adaptable. But to make sure that we are on the same line, we need to have consolidate people's between kind of trusted community. Otherwise, almost impossible to really adapt. So that's something that we have to really to learn because we used to be living in the society with everything has been planned in advance. But so the move is really transition is to move to more agile and flexible, as I feel comfortable with our agile point of view.
Thank you. We're getting to the end of our webinar. I have just one final question. If both Dr. Rachel and Dr. Harayama can perhaps answer very simply and succinctly and briefly, a very tough question, but thinking perhaps in the context of Malaysia, but also generally, if you were to transition to Society 5.0, where do we start? What is the priority we should begin with? I know that's a very tough and unfair question, but if we can end it with that, that would be great. Dr. Rachel first, and then Dr. Harayama. Dr. Rachel?
Wow, not giving me time to think about this, but I'll do my best. I think we begin by really getting more diverse voices at the table in order to think about what this is going to look like for everyone. We need to have input from as many different parties as possible. And I think one very clear way, when I say, of course, we can't be literally having everyone at the table, and there's so many different competing interests. But one place I think we can begin is really allowing, let's say, digital rights experts and representatives of communities of persons with disabilities, because I think these are the groups that often don't get to hear, to make their points of view heard when it comes to policy decision making, and we really do need to hear from them. So I would start with that.
Thank you, Dr. Rachel. Dr. Harayama, any thoughts?
There's so many conflicts around the world today, and even we have a chance to take advantage of technology to improve our way of living. There's so many negative thinking within. So what I will propose to move to the Society 5.0, to have really just take off your negative side and think what could be really new for you and constructive way to really foresee the future, and then talk about, and then find kind of community, and then take action concretely in your field to experiment your ideas. And then something that you can do on your side without any big organization or something. But what I will suggest is really for each of us from our side, convinced that you can take in a positive action, and then find friends or community, work together. That's against all the conflict and so on. So
thank you, Dr. Harayama, and I think that's a perfect way to end our webinar today. Again, Society 5.0, what captured me is it's really values driven. Also understanding that many things in this world is a social construct, and therefore there is an opportunity for society to come towards a consensus, and therefore technology should enable that consensus. So back to Dr. Rachel's point as well, I think it's very key to at least begin to see Society 5.0 not just as an end, but as a process to move towards that consensus. And that is, for me, very enlightening, as the focus I thought would be more on the technological aspects, but I think we neatly interfaced what the topic of today is, which is technology focused, human centered. With that, on that note, I would like to once again thank our brilliant speaker and discussant. Thank you, Dr. Harayama. Thank you, Dr. Rachel, for really giving us an enlightening session. And I would like to also thank again our partners, the Embassy of Japan, Ministry of Foreign Affairs Japan, and RICAN for making today a reality. I also would like to thank our colleagues at ISIS Malaysia for working hard to make our event a reality today. With that, I would like to thank all of you as well, and thank you for tuning in today. I hand it back to Farlina to close the proceedings. Farlina?
Thank you, Alizan, panelists and participants, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes the webinar on Society 5.0, Technology Focused, Human Centered. There will be a short survey that will pop up at our browser. We will be most grateful to get your thoughts on the items provided. Thank you once again for your participation. We look forward to having you in our future events soon.